grow faster than others?
Why?
Because they have better technology or they were in better places.
Right, so geographic location. What else? Brandon, what do you got?
Put available food.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Arthur? Cargo? What do you mean by cargo?
Supplies.
Supplies, yeah.
So they have more supplies abilities there?
Devin?
The ability to store food.
Ability to store food, yeah. So just like we talked about, that's probably the most important one, right? The ability they can store food. And number 3. What does number 3 say? Let's read it real quick.
For thousands of years, people have been cultivating crops. Describe the process used to domesticate and create plants that even bigger, tastier harvest.
So that was the last part of that video, right? So what were they doing? We just talked about it. Grow barley and wheat, but how did they get more production out of barley and wheat? Yeah, so they handpicked the larger seeds that would yield more crop. Okay? So even if they might not have known what they were doing, they were domesticating crops in a way that produced more food for them. Does that make sense? But does anybody have any questions about that? Does that make sense? I just wanted to show you the video because it kind of puts a visual perspective of the things we were talking about yesterday. Okay? So, what is your next available page in your notebook? Take your notebooks out real quick. 52. Okay, so we're going to put this worksheet on page 52. Okay, and remember what I said in the beginning? You can go on YouTube and you can watch the rest of the video, answer the rest of the questions for extra credit. Okay, so there's like 4 more questions on there, 5 more questions on there. It's about half an hour more of the video. It's pretty interesting. He just keeps going into more depth about things we're talking about. Okay. So flip to your next available right page. So the next available, what is that available? 53? Okay. So real quick. Yeah, so the unit page should be that first page of the notebook, and then the table of contents should be the next one, so skip those 2 pages. And then we start the notebook. So on your next available left-hand page, we are going to go through real quick there. Right-hand page. My bad.
So what page is it? What number? 53.
That's you. 55. Take notes on page 55. Okay? Yep.
So what about this page right here? That we just did. That one down to 52 then.
Yeah, we'll figure out where to go. We'll just worry about the notes. 54. So we want to have the notes on page 55, okay, and then we're going to make a bubble chart on page 54. So let's put this worksheet, the one that we just did, on page 56. Okay. Does that make sense? So the guns, germs, and steel worksheet will go on 56, and our notes and the chart will go on 54. So real quick, we're just going to go through a little PowerPoint about what we're just going to go through a real quick PowerPoint that talks about the motives for imperialism. Okay? So what is the motive? What is motive? A reason, yeah. Yeah, so the reason that you do something. So we're going to talk about the motives of imperialism. Okay? So, we're going to define imperialism. We know what it is, right? Anybody have any questions about that? So imperialism is going to be the attempt by a strong country to dominate the economic, political, and social life of weaker regions or nations. Everybody seen this picture before? It's pretty famous. So if this is England, what are all these hands going to represent? England having different interests all over the world, right? I don't know if you guys can see this, but it says India here, Jamaica here, what else? Some country here. All the way up here is Northland. So what is that representing? England just having interests all over the world. Okay? And why do countries like England go to places like Africa? Economic interests. So manufacturers wanted access to natural resources such as rubber, petroleum, manganese, wool, and cotton. Right? We talked about natural resources. Did England have an opportunity to get a lot of natural resources in England? What do we think? Yeah?
England has natural resources.
But do they have an abundant amount of natural resources to feed and produce things for the millions of people that live there? No. So they're going to go out and they're going to look for other ways to obtain those resources. Again, if they go to foreign countries, do you think it's going to be cheaper or more expensive to get enough resources from those countries? Cheaper, right? They're going to want to find the easiest and most cost-effective way to get those resources. They wanted markets in which to sell their manufactured goods, such as cotton, cloth, machinery, steel, and wine. So what does that mean? If Britain and England and France and all these places are going to other countries to get resources, what are those countries like economic-wise? Where are they at?
Pretty well.
Yeah, the ones that they're going to take.
They're like weaker, so
They're pretty weak, right?
their money is like nothing compared to theirs, so then they sell it all.
Exactly. So if they're going to go over there, do you think those places have things like cotton and machinery and guns and stuff like that? No. So when they go to those countries, they're going to say, hey, look at all these awesome things that we're bringing you. Would you like to buy these things? What did they do then? They opened up a new market in a foreign country where they're not only exploiting the goods that those people have and taking them back to Britain, but they're now bringing their goods to those countries and selling those goods in those countries to make a profit. So it's like a double whammy for England, right? So England wanted places in which their citizens could emigrate. What does emigrate mean? So immigrate is to come here. What do you think emigrate means? To go there, right? So basically England wanted places like in Australia and India and places like that, almost like a vacation home. They wanted places where their citizens could go, have a good time, see a different part of the country.
Like we have Hawaii.
Like we have Hawaii, we have Puerto Rico is a territory for us. Same exact thing. We wanted other places for our citizens to go and enjoy themselves. So the political and military interests. Naval and merchant ships needed ports to take on supplies. So what's the easiest way to get around the country or around the world at this time? Ships, right? Sailing. So if they have access to other countries that they can access by water, they're going to want to establish ports there. Why is that? What are you saying about that? Yeah, good. So they're going to be able to set up, establish ports in those cities, and then they can trade with those countries more effectively. And they can bring in goods and take out goods more effectively since they have ports in those countries. So naval forces needed ports from which to protect their country's colonies. So now we're going out, we're imperializing these new countries. What are other countries doing at the same time? They're also imperializing, right? So if I'm France and I see that Britain has the Congo or something like that, as an area rich in natural resources, what am I going to want to do? I'm going to want to go take that land for myself, right? So if all these countries want to fight over these natural resources, they're going to have to establish naval ports and forts and things of that nature to protect their interests in that region. Does that make sense? So more colonies equals world power, like we saw in that first image on the first slide with all the hands extending out to the different countries, right? Did we see in that first slide, what was the quote on that first slide? What does that say? Sun never sets on the British Empire. What does that mean?
It's always
So So the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Yeah, Rico?
Like British are like happy with what they have. Like they always want more.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. So see these red places?
Yes.
These are places that England had some form of control in. Okay? So what it means by the sun never sets on the British Empire, when the sun is up in Australia, is the sun up in North America? No. But when the sun is up in North America, is it up in Australia?
No.
Yes. So flip-flops, right? Because they're in different hemispheres. So if the sun is up here and it's dark over here, the sun is still up in the British Empire. But if the sun is up over here and it's dark over here, is the sun still up in the British Empire?
Yes.
So the sun technically never sets on the British Empire because they have such a world expansion that all of their colonies have some form of daylight all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So moving on.
Mr. President, you have a question?
Sorry. Yeah.
So, on the map where it shows all the red, does the British Empire still have all of those places?
You tell me. What do you
Are they
think?
still?
Does the British Empire still control Canada?
Oh, no.
So they do have some interest in places like this, but most of these places were given their freedom, like they were given freedom from Britain. But during the time of imperialism, Britain did control all of this. Okay. So, humanitarian, social religious. Western countries felt obligated to spread Western ideas regarding religion, law, medicine to Africa and Asia. This was called the white man's burden. And why do you think it's called the white man's burden? Because they're forcing themselves upon them. What else? Why is it the white man's job to go imperialize these countries? Are you saying what else? They're more sophisticated, right? In their eyes, they're going and doing them a service. These people have no culture, they live in poverty, in the eyes of the British people, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but in the eyes of the British people, it was their job to go colonize these areas to bring these people up to standards with the rest of the world. But if you're living in these countries and you're happy with the way of life, you're necessarily going to agree with that?
Why would you be happy with the way of life?
What's that?
Why would you be like happy with your way of life? Don't you think they would want British colonizing?
You tell me, why would they want British colonization? What do you think?
Well, like it's making them better, isn't it?
It's giving them goods. Yeah, they're going to get goods in return. They're going to get some more technology. But what's going to happen to their economies? Yeah?
Like, the British or the Western or whatever can, like, control what happens and, like, how.
Exactly, right? So if you have had a government and a political system and an economic system the same way for thousands of years in your country, and all of a sudden some white people show up with guns and they tell you you are now going to operate this way, you might not be so inclined to do that. Even though, yes, you're right, they did get things in return. Okay. So European culture promoted social Darwinism. Remember, this is one of our vocab words. Survival of the fittest and natural selection applied to society just as they did to plant and animal kingdoms. So what does that mean? A little louder or not? The who? The strong will survive. What do you mean by that? Tyler, you want to help me out? Why is that? Because we have exactly. So, in the eyes of the white male, they're going to go over to these places and they're going to take over because that is their right. Okay? They are superior to these people in their own minds. They are superior to these people. So they have the right to go take the resources from these people. Is that fair? So why was imperialism successful? So this is a map of Africa. African states have been depleted by centuries of slave trade. So we're getting into the 1700s and 1800s. When did the slave trade begin in Africa?
Wasn't it like 1700s?
Long time before this. Hundreds of years people have been trading slaves in Africa. Okay? So if you have your strongest and most able-bodied citizens getting sent off to other countries, what's that going to do to your population? It's going to deplete it, and it's going to make you pretty weak. So when other countries come to imperialize you, are you going to be able to defend yourself? The West African states have been at war between themselves for years. There's lots of conflict going on in Africa. What was one of the reasons there was lots of conflict going on in Africa? It has to do with resources. So what, in Africa, remember we ranked Africa as one of the most inhospitable places to live, right? So what does that have to do with their resources? Are they going to have a lot of resources or a little amount of resources? Few amount of resources. So what's that going to do as the population expands? It's going to make it harder for those people to get those resources, okay? So if it makes it harder for them to get the resources, that's going to cause conflict. That's going to cause people to fight over those resources, and that's why those people have been at war for so long. So if they're warring with each other, are they necessarily going to want to make an alliance together to fight off the British? Or are they going to take the British guns to use to fight each other? They're going to fight each other, right? There's some deep-rooted wars going on at the time. You're not going to be able to simply say, oh, no, we're going to be friends now. That's not how it works. So the Ottoman Empire of the Middle East, the Mughal Empire of India, and the Qing Empire of China were in decline. So before this, from about 1200 to 1400, what was going on then in Europe? There's the B. Black Plague, right? Black Plague. So while the Black Plague was going on, places like India, China, and the Middle East, they were on the rise. Black Plague was not a huge problem for them, so they were taking advantage of that time. But once the Black Plague ended, all these European countries are going to want to catch up. Okay? So now you're going to start to see a decline in those Chinese and Mughal empires and Ottoman empires. So you're not going to see too much imperialization going on from these people. Mainly going to be European countries that are imperializing places now. So can we all see this map? I don't know if you can see the different colors very well or not, but these colors and this legend here represent different territories controlled by different countries, European countries, right? So we got Belgium, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Portugal, and Spain. All have economic interests or all have some sort of tie to different areas in Africa. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different European countries have interests going on in that area. There's going to be a massive fight for those resources. So what are some Western advantages? Stable governments, strong economies. By 1914, France and Germany had invested over 20% of their wealth abroad, Britain 25%. Is that a lot? That's a ton. Okay? That is a lot of their, a quarter of all of the money that they're spending is going to imperialize these other countries. Why is it so important for them to imperialize these other countries? Resources, what else? Matt, what'd you say? They're rich, right? They have the power to go do these things. If they can expand their empire, that's what they're going to do. What else do they have? They have powerful armies and navies, superior weaponry, superior technology, railroads, telegraph, medicine. So let's say hypothetically, I am an African colony and I want to go to Britain and I want to take over things in Britain. I'm going to sail over there, try to take over things from them. Do the African people at this time have medicine? No. So what's going to happen when they get to Europe?
They get burnt.
They can get burnt. So they're going to get lots of diseases that they can't fight off. But other way around, Europeans, they are now developing medicines, they have vaccines for different diseases in Africa. So when they go to Africa, they are going to be ridden with those diseases, but they're going to be able to fight them off. Okay? So the African people are going to catch the diseases from Europeans. That's going to kill a lot of their people, like it did with Native Americans. But they're not going to be able to have those vaccines. So massive populations of African people are going to die, while Europeans are able to fight off those diseases with their medicine. And same thing with the armies and navies. You think a few tribes in Africa can take on a British army with guns and weapons and technology they don't have? Definitely not. Yeah, you may come back. So, how did the Western powers rule their empires? The colonies. French practiced direct rule. Remember we talked about that? That was one of our vocab words. Direct rule. They wanted to impose their culture on their colonies. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? For the people that live there, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Bad thing, right? If you have a set way of religious practices and someone else coming in and telling you what to do, they're not going to be very happy about that. How did they control those people? Military force. Okay? If you have a gun, you are going to be much more superior to someone who doesn't. So they're going to have military personnel in those countries at all times, making sure that those people don't step out of line. If they do, so how did the Western powers rule their empires continue? Colonies, the British, unlike the French, if the French practice direct rule, the British practice indirect rule. Okay? They use locals to enforce British law. So this is probably going to be a little bit more favorable to the local population. Like when Britain went to India, they would allow Indian people, Indian government officials to hold their titles, keep their titles. So it was technically Indians still in charge of the government, but who had the ultimate say of what went on in India? British. Okay? So although they are giving them a little bit more leeway than the French would, it's still not a beneficial system for the people in India. Okay. Do you have any questions? Make sense? So, protectorates. Local rulers left in place but expected to follow the advice of European advisors. Remember, this is another one of our vocab terms. Okay. So, do you think a protectorate is going to be a little bit better than indirect rule? Is it going to be better than direct rule? Yeah. But who are you still taking orders from? Those European powers. Okay. So it says here usually require a little bit less military presence, but they still are going to have the military presence in that region. Does that make sense? So last one, sphere of influence. So this is going to be the least invasive to the local people. The sphere of influence, local rulers left in place. The outside power claimed exclusive investment of trading privileges with the region or country. So if I'm England or France and I want to go get diamonds out of Sierra Leone, I'm going to go there and establish a sphere of influence, which basically means no one else can come in and take advantage of those economic resources. Those are ours. We're going to protect those with the military. We don't have so much to do with their government. We're going to let them do their own thing. But when we want to come collect our resources, those are ours now. No one else has access to them. Does that make sense? So, what's our overall thought on imperialism then? What do we think? Good or bad? Oh. Yeah. What about the people? But what about the people being imperialized? Probably not very good for them. Right? So, does anybody have any more questions on that? On your next page. That was supposed to be on page 3.
Next page is this.
So that was on the right side of the page, right? On 55. So on 54, you are going to set up what's called a bubble chart. Okay. So turn to page 54 in your notebook. We're going to set up something that looks kind of like this. Okay, so you're going to have motives in the middle of your paper, just like that. And we are going to take down these different motives. So everybody should be able to see this. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 motives that we're going to talk about. And we're going to categorize them into either social, political, or economic. Does that make sense? Yeah, so like on here, you got your motives right here in the middle, okay? And you're going to have economic, political, and social. And then we're going to categorize each one. So put motives in the middle, leave a little bit of space, and then we'll place each one in those motives. Okay?
Economic, political, and what?
Economic, political, and social. So just put those in each little corner of the paper. So let's go ahead and start with naval ports. Okay? Naval ports, what do we think? Social, political, or economic? What do you think? Raise a couple of hands. Tyler? Economic? Why economic? Increases trade. Devin, what do you think?
Social,
Social? Why social?
because you're like setting up towards another country and you have to talk to them and like you trade with them.
Yeah? That's good. What else? Could it be political too? You're on?
Yeah.
I was thinking that it could be economic, because it's like you're trading different goods from different places,
Yeah.
so you get like a little bit of everything.
What would be an example of political? Brandon?
Allows them to enforce their power on that.
Good, yeah, exactly. So remember what we were talking about just a few minutes ago? When people get out of line in these countries, what are they gonna do? They're gonna use their military force to put them back in line, right? So, can this one be put into one category? No, right? So naval ports had social, political, and economic influences for that region, so you can go ahead and put it in each of the three categories. Does that make sense? What about teaching natives to read and write English? What do we think? Devin?
Social,
Social, why?
because you're teaching them how to speak your language.
Good, yeah, exactly. So they're extending their influence into that region by having the people learn to read and write English. Remember we talked about with indirect rule? What would the Indian princes, where would they send their children to school?
England,
England, why?
so they could be the new leaders.
Exactly. So England doesn't have direct control over those countries like India, but what they're going to do is they're going to bring in the Indian children, educate them in England, give them an England view or English view of the world, and then send them back to then keep extending it. So what about Native people and Christianity? What do we think? Social? Why social? Yeah.
Like, put one before you're teaching them, or like introducing them to the spiritual religion.
Yeah. Devin, what are you going to say? Same thing? So what else could that one be? What else do you think that could be? Could it be political? Yeah, why? Yeah, or Megan, what do you think? Yeah, exactly.